This is July 2nd, 2026. I'll be speaking with members of the United Auto Workers, the UAW, about a successful effort at a recent national union convention to ban the UAW from investing in Israel bonds. One person I'll be talking to is Mike Davis, a parts manufacturing worker, and the other is Marcus Hyde, a public defender. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Thanks for having us.
Great. So let me start with you, Mike. What passed at the convention on June 18th?
We were able to pass a resolution demanding that the UAW sell all of its bonds and no longer purchase any more bonds from Israel.
And that really sums it up. I saw the language and it's pretty stark. How much money are we talking about?
I believe when we started, it was around 400,000, but we passed it, and they didn't know the exact amount at the time. But I believe it only took them a couple of days to totally divest, as far as what they've told us. So it couldn't have been that much money if they were able to do it in 2 days.
Yeah, that's good. The union press release talks about a caucus called Unite All Workers for Democracy that I guess spearheaded the effort. So tell us about this caucus, if you would.
We've been around for, I think, 5 years, 6 years or so. We were born out of the corruption scandal in the late teens. So, coming out of that, we were calling for resolutions to have our leadership ousted. We were one of the main drivers for one member, one vote, going into the Constitutional Convention 4 years ago. And we were able to pull that off. We were also the caucus responsible for bringing folks like Sean Fain and Brandon Mancia and Dan Vicente up to the IEB.
So it didn't start, I thought it was all about Palestine, but I see it's much more impressive. Started with as the name implies, democratic issues. And
Yeah,
when did I'm sorry.
no, that's all right. We're a class struggle caucus, so that's our number one focus is class struggle. That just happened to be where we started at, was one member, one vote. We knew as long as the administrative caucus, or the Walter Reuther caucus, as they called themselves, as long as they had full control over who was going to be in power, folks like us, rank and file, were never going to have a voice. So that's what we pushed for first. We got that, and we're going to keep pushing for more democracy within the UAW going forward.
And when did the caucus take on the issue of Palestine? How many years ago?
I believe as soon as the October 7th attacks
Uh,
happened and the retaliation began, I believe at that point they started discussing the resolutions and bringing everything to light. But I really wasn't that heavily involved at that point. Marcus might be better to speak on that.
okay. Well, before we get to him, one last question. Tell me about the work you do and what got you interested in the issue of Palestine.
Um, I'm I'm a German machine repairer, so I sit in a factory and I wrench on stuff all day. I don't think my work really has a lot to do with where I stand on these issues, but I've been aware of the injustices happening in Gaza and the West Bank for at least a decade now. I think I'd like to thank TYT and folks like Hassan Biker and other podcasters and YouTubers that actually speak on this stuff and have for years and years and years. But as far as what my personal on it was, probably 6 or 7 years ago, just seeing the atrocities that they're committing with their land grabs. But then watching the October 7th attacks and knowing what they were about to do to the Palestinian people, that's really where my activism began, was just because I knew that they were going to go in and just slaughter them. And they did. They absolutely have slaughtered. After hundreds of thousands of them have been killed, they want to play like it's less than 100,000, but it's definitely not. But it's just atrocious what they're doing. So,
Yeah. Marcus, could you also tell me about the work that you do and what got you interested in Palestine?
Sure. Thanks again for having us. Yes, I'm a public defender in the Bronx. We're organized under the UAW, and it's great that we get to be in the same big union with a bunch of auto workers, including the auto workers from Local 600 who first brought this issue to the UAW back in 1973. In 1973, they struck against their own local for divesting in Israel or investing in Israeli bonds. And they tried to bring this to the National Convention back in 1974. Many of these workers were themselves people displaced by the Nakba, which is the ethnic cleansing of Palestine that began in 1948. And they didn't want their dollars being spent, their dues dollars being spent to bomb their families abroad. I used to be a part of a different union. I used to be a carpenter. I've been in the trades for many years. I've only been an attorney for the last 3 years, and so I've only been in the UAW for the last 3 years. But it's really exciting to be a part of the UAW here in my local 2325. We've been passionate about Palestine for a long time. In 2004, Labor for Palestine, which works closely with UAWD, similar politics. In 2004, that started to try to respond to Palestinian unions who were putting out calls for international solidarity. Those calls have amplified as Israel's violence has amplified, especially since October 7th. So when Palestinian trade unions put out a call soon after October 7th, they knew what was coming from Israel, the genocide that was about to unfold. My union, my local, responded by calling for a ceasefire early on, and we put pressure on the UAW to call for a ceasefire too. Thankfully, the UAW was the first major union to call for a ceasefire, and then this divestment vote was, the follow-up from that, saying we can't just call for a ceasefire. We actually have to remove our money. And the UAW represents, approximately 300,000 workers and 600 some thousand retirees, which means that lots of money over the years has been invested into Israel. And the UAW actually, shamefully, has had a long-standing relationship with the racist Histadrut, which is the so-called labor union of Israel. It's a racist Jewish supremacist organization that actually is anti-worker and is about enforcing a Jewish-only labor force. So really, for many years, the UAW was invested in into apartheid, into ethnic cleansing and genocide. And this divestment, this is, the first logical step. And it's really the culmination of workers across the country being fed up with seeing genocide on our screens every day.
So, Mike, about this vote, I'm out of the AFT, American Federation of Teachers, and most of what we do is done by resolutions at the national conventions. But this is a constitutional amendment. I mean, that's part of your constitution. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, and that's the most exciting part is not only did we get rid of what we had, but we're making sure that they're not going to invest again in the future. And it's not just this administration, but it's every administration going forward. So it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, this is major news. I think the UAW, with its hundreds of thousands of members, its storied history, and has taken part in the strongest BDS act that I can remember. Were there other large or successful divestment efforts that you pointed to when you were doing your campaign? Other unions, maybe?
Maybe Marcus can speak on that. I can't
Sure.
think of it.
So I think the UAW, with all our retirees, we represent about 1 million people, making us the largest non-governmental institution in the U.S. to divest from Israel. States, Michigan, and several cities have divested, and that's many more millions of dollars than the UAW had invested. But again, if you look at the history and how instrumental U.S. labor has been in propping up this genocidal regime, in propping up a racist state, this is really monumental for the workers to take a stand and to correct course here. Of course, it's not finished. There's much more work to be done as far as a just transition for workers who are currently, implicated in making some of these armaments that get sold to Israel. We need a just transition for them into, a more productive line of work. But this is an important first step.
So, Mike, reading the press release, it's almost like a drama. I mean, at first there was a broader resolution on Palestine, and then that turned into an effort solely on the Israel bonds. Can you talk a little bit about what happened at the convention, Mike?
Yeah, when we tried to pass the first resolution, it had much tougher language in there. It called for us to cut ties with the Histadrut, and it called for us to support our workers that work in the armament industry when they decide that they want to be, what is the word? Objective. Can't remember.
If they want to strike.
Yeah, if they want to strike, but further than that, just if they don't want to be a part of it at all, there should have been there was language in there that would have helped them on job retraining, or if they did do a work stoppage, we would help them out with strike pay. But the UAW leadership and all the powers that be in the room said that that's illegal. We can't do that. Blah blah blah. So that one got shot down just based off the illegality of it. But I'm sorry, there's nothing illegal about saying I don't want to take part in a genocide. Conscientious objectors. We have that in the military. If our U.S. military forces can sit there and say they don't want to take part in a horrible operation that goes against their morals, why do our workers not have that same right? Why can't our workers say, I don't want to take part of building all these Abram tanks that I know are going to go over and kill children in Palestine? Why can't they get trained on another line? Why can't they take some time off work? I get like it's in our business plan as the UAW to not interfere with businesses, to not cause them undue stress and to allow them to keep making profit. But to sit there and have the conversation that especially like, let's imagine one of those armament workers was Iranian, one of them was Palestinian, and they're literally their own families getting killed over there. You're telling me we can't back them and let them step out of that for a little bit, not have to make the tanks that are going to go roll over their families. But to a broader point of that, they spoke on the illegality of it. And the point I've been making in our caucus is that we are not the United States of America UAW. We're the international UAW. And we need to set policies and place that we can look out for anybody, no matter where they're at. And one example I used in a previous interview is, what if we had members in Bosnia? What if we had organized in Bosnia and the Bosnian government decided that they were going to make all their armament workers make nukes so that they could bomb all their neighbors? Do you think that the International Executive Board would look at that situation and be like, oh, God, no, that's illegal. There's no way we can support those strikers in Bosnia and not send them money? No, because they're not tied to that system in Bosnia, because they wouldn't care. If it was Puerto Rico, I don't even think they would care. I mean, we are kind of controlled. Puerto Rico is controlled by the U.S., but still, they're so entwined with the U.S. system, and they want so bad to be a part of that system that they can't stand the thought that they might do something that would make that system upset at them. But if it was another country we were talking about and they were committing atrocities or helping commit atrocities, I don't think we'd have a bit of an issue pulling out. But because, again, they think we're the United States of America UAW, they just want to bow down to them.
But at some point, you decided you didn't have the votes to get that passed, and you took a narrower focus just on the Israel bonds,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That one did. It got shot down. We weren't able to bring it out of committee, unfortunately. But the next one was, and it was just divesting. And I wish we could have done the larger one, but we'll take what we can get for right now, and we're just going to keep working on it in the future. We'll have more resolutions to pass, and hopefully some tougher language that does complete what we wanted to.
Yeah. Now we were talking about the bonds. Well, let me finish that last question. So you took a narrower resolution to the convention just about Israel bonds, but it sounds from the press release that that wasn't assured either, and you really had to do a lot of work to convince delegates. Am I right about that interpretation?
So
Yeah, it was a really close vote at the end, and I think if it weren't people like, and I can't remember the gentleman's name out of 600. He stood up and spoke in the new administrative caucus meeting that morning and gave a moving speech and really turned around some of the people in that room. But if it wouldn't have been for him in that room, I don't know if we would have, because going into that morning meeting, from what we've been told, was the IEB was against us and didn't want anything to do with it. And if it hadn't been for that Lebanese member to stand up and speak on what was happening with him, and his family, and where they stood on it, I don't know if we would have passed. So, um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, all credit to a single voice, single individual people can make changes, and it's a real tribute to that. Um, Now, you've mentioned that they dumped the bonds, and you got that message. And when we in Connecticut talked about that, they kept telling us, "Oh, there's no secondary market for Israel bonds. We can't sell them. We just have to wait years for them to mature." But they seem to have overcome that problem in Connecticut. I mean, in with the UAW. Is that right, Marcus?
yeah, first I just want to credit Mike for reading out the larger resolution that called for supporting striking workers, that called for not endorsing politicians that didn't speak out against the genocide, that called for all these other things, that called for a strike if um, anyway, Mike pulled that resolution out. We did not get all the votes in order to get it voted on by the general body, and that's why we focus on the more narrow thing. But I still think it's important to bring those kind of politics to the floor and let a debate happen, even if we ultimately fail. Because I think there's always going to be fear mongering about this. The IEB members of it said it would be impossible to divest from Israeli bonds. It would cost us millions more than we have invested in it. They made up all these excuses, and other people said, "Oh, this has got to somehow be illegal, right?" But then after the vote happened, it, like Mike said, it only took 3 days for them to actually divest from it. And it turns out it didn't bankrupt the union. And it
Hmm.
turns out that when you look at history, nobody questions the fact that the UAW divested from apartheid South Africa. Nobody looks back at that history and goes, "Oh, maybe that was illegal," or "Oh, maybe it wasn't the right time." Of course it was the right time. And of course this is the right time. And of course, if there's a will, if the workers demand it, if the workers refuse to participate in it, I mean, that's what strikes, and that's the power of our labor, is our uh, that's the power of our union, is workers being willing to say, no, I'm not participating in one way or the other, whether that's work stoppages, whether that's our dues dollars, whether that's investments. We have the power to say no.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's it.
Basically, my last question was about response from Palestine. I understand a Palestinian Union wrote to you all about what occurred at the convention. Well, Mike or Marcus, what did they say?
So, I'll take this unless Mike, you want to say something about it.
No, you go ahead. I can't remember exactly their quote.
Sure. So the FTU, the Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions out of Gaza, released a statement saying, this we're watching what's happening there, and thank you for taking this tremendous stand. I think I was in Palestine in December last, and I've been there a couple of times, and I'm in regular contact with workers both in Palestine and Palestinian diaspora here. And it means so much to folks in Palestine to know that there's folks here on the ground not forgetting about them. And I think they give us too much credit. I sometimes, because I think we haven't done enough. I look at other workers around the world. They're stopping shipments in Italy. They're stopping shipments in Greece. They're shutting down docks where armaments are supposed to be shipping. And there are folks that are pushing for that here. In Oakland, they delayed some shipments. In New Jersey on May 22nd, a handful of people got arrested for trying to stop armed shipments. We need more of that. This genocide it's not going to stop, not because we elect certain people to office. It's not going to stop unless the workers put a stop to it. There are no incentives there for the people in power to divest from this war, to divest from ongoing genocide. And Israel structurally is invested in expanding this war in perpetuity, not just Gaza, not just the West Bank, where they're trying to Gazify the West Bank, not just Lebanon, not just Iran. They're a threat to all of humanity. And, I think over the last couple of years, we've been more exposed to it than ever. And I think workers are fed up. I think we're at a moment now where there is a critical mass where we can take action if we organize. We can put an end to this war because we have to. The current system is not sustainable. It's going to kill us all.
Mike or Marcus, I'm out of questions. Anything we haven't gotten into that you wanted to mention? That's all right. That's all right too.
So I just want to say how proud I am of other locals here in 23, 25. We are often very vocal about Palestine, but I'm proud of Mike. I'm proud of UAWD members all over the country in talking about these issues on the shop floor, in the factory, and not being rolled over by the fear mongering of the IEB, the bosses, or the union heads. So thanks, Mike, for your leadership. And yeah.
Well, what you've done is really inspiring, and I want to thank you both for this interview.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Stanley.